2 years ago, I decided to leave my university, and it was both a really expensive decision, but also one of the best decisions I ever made, which ended up making me more money than any other move I've made. The majority of people now know by now that university is a lot less valuable than it used to be. So the more lucrative courses, such as finance and economics, were the ones to go for, rather than just following whatever you're interested in. Well, my finance course was quite the opposite. Why I went to university? Well, at the time, I was just looking for stability while still earning a good career and some progression in front of me rather than being stuck at a fixed job. I was looking to make good friends and get connections. I was really just looking to meet what could be future employers and industries. And there were programs and networking opportunities for these future employers at the university, or so I thought. And the possibility of a high-paying career like banking or finance or even investment banking was something that stood out to me. I was also open to the idea that I might find something new or be introduced to a program or course or a future industry through events that would pique my interest. I saw a value in the job and industry fairs with real companies. I was really eager to go to these and just hang out, meet people, meet new companies, and see what was out there. But unfortunately, what university ended up being like was kind of nothing like what I was hoping for or expecting. While, yeah, there were plenty of things that people tell you about, there were also plenty of things that I really didn't see coming and kind of swayed my decision on whether it was worth my time, which is unfortunate. The curriculum and skills I were learning were not as advertised, to say the least. They didn't end up providing value to my earning potential, and parts of the course weren't even enjoyable. Lots of them were, but as it went on, it got more and more kind of draggish, and I started to question why I was there and what the point in doing it was. The opportunity cost became more clear, which was ironic because that is one of the topics I was learning at the time. I was spending hundreds of pounds a semester on travel and transport, as well as food, as I would try my very best to avoid buying food on campus, not only because it wasn't particularly nice, but because they could charge a fortune. So I'd just make food at home. I was also having to spend loads of money on minimum equipment required and materials for courses that didn't really benefit me. Losing loads of time due to poor administration decisions, which I'll get back to in a minute. And all of this money I was spending, some of which they were forcing me to spend, like textbooks and course content, as I mentioned. I didn't even use half of it, and it didn't help me. And that feeds into the further cost of time. And as I say, the administration on the university's part was pretty shocking. Some of the worst I would have is where there would be a 9 a.m. lecture, which is like, okay, you got to get up in the morning, right? But then there'd be a gap after that, and then a 6 p.m. lecture. And it wasn't really feasible for me to drive all the way home and then drive all the way back again. So I ended up staying at the university and just trying to kill time. I tried to be as productive as possible. I couldn't work from university. That wasn't an option. So I just ended up doing coursework and classwork that I was assigned to try and kill the time. But even doing so, there was still loads and loads of time left over that just felt like I was wasting it. And it got really frustrating at some points. And I was even paying for parking through all of this time when I'm not doing anything at the university. It was pretty horrible and not a very nice feeling. This led to losing time and money because I could have been working and learning skills. And when I say working, I'll get onto my job later on. But I could have been learning skills like making these videos and learning editing I would have been interested in, or marketing or something like that, or maybe even sales, whatever piqued my interest. Worst case scenario, I could have been at home relaxing, not doing anything, and that would have been more beneficial because at least I'm getting some rest, whereas at university, I'm just plodding around doing nothing because I've got to wait all of these hours. And another problem I had is the opportunities were thin. There were more emphasis on hobbies and clubs than actually developing yourselves. I would have been intrigued in opportunities, extracurricular activities that they offered where, meeting employers or getting insights into industries and workplaces. Maybe there'd be talks on employers in a given industry that I was interested in, like finance or banking at the time. But it was more so, games clubs and people who had specific focuses and interests on fiction. And that was really pushed down your throat in the first year, and it's not something I'm particularly interested in. Maybe that was just my university, but it could have been many other universities as well, so that's something to consider. Now, when it came to making the decision on whether or not to be in university, the thought crossed my mind quite early, but it seemed very risky to start with. there's lots of financial uncertainty, especially when you have the pressure of, debt or however you're going to finance it, whether it be privately, whatever it may be. Regardless, there's a lot of stress around that. And another thing that really scared me is the risk of being stuck in a dead end, and fear of being stuck would cause, fear and anxiety. So luckily, partway through my first year, I ended up having an interview for a part-time finance job in a nearby city, which was close to the university and also close to where I lived at the time. And I was fortunate enough to be offered that job, and I took it along with a couple other people in that same position. And the job enabled me to work and earn some money, which was fantastic, and build some experience, which proved to be very valuable. Far more valuable than the course I was doing, which, as we all know, the experience in certain skills and industries tends to be more valuable than education these days. The job also enabled full-time and overtime, which obviously I couldn't exploit since I was at university. But this did help sway my decision, as it's something that's in the back of my mind, which would enable me to have that thing to fall back on if I decided to leave. And what I ended up deciding is, if I were to commit to working full-time plus overtime, I'd still have time outside of work to figure out what I wanted to do long-term, indulge in interests like this YouTube video, for example. And my only issue then was it was slightly embarrassing to leave, as it sounded like I was admitting defeat. So in the end, I did decide to leave. But what I actually did is take a gap year and then leave after the end of that gap year. That way, if I ended up deciding that I made a mistake, I hadn't cut any ties and I could go back. You see loads of people committing to decisions to force them to play their cards. And when you think about it, it sounds like a good idea because you're then forced to do what you think you want to do. But if it ends up being a mistake, you're really stuck. And having that opportunity to know I've got that part-time job to go full-time and I've got this gap year where I could go back if I needed to was a luxury. But I did end up leaving because it was the correct decision for me to leave. We've got to consider the economics of this, because the opportunity cost of a year studying compared to a year of work and a side hustle is massive, to say the least. And a lot can change in a year. I know when you're young, it doesn't seem like it, or if you've never experienced a lot of change, it really doesn't seem like it, but it does. I needed to consider what skills would actually increase my income, since that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to earn more money. I could then buy back my time in the future and change my lifestyle. A degree in a job probably wouldn't have done that. So I had to consider what skills would actually increase my income, whether that would be sales, marketing, how to manage people and work with people, maybe technical skills as well as soft skills, certain softwares, things like that. And none of this I could get from university. I'd have to do it outside of class time. I'd have to consider the risk and reward of leaving. There is risk that I would be capping my future, but then there's also be a risk, much like business, where I could then earn far more money and get far more experience. And I decided that the opportunities are far greater after leaving. I could have, and did, increase my hours at work, indulge in side hustles to earn more money, which I did. And then one day, which I'm looking to do at the moment, is start my own business, which of course has uncapped earning potential and can kind of enable whatever I like. So that's what's next for me. I've got work and a side hustle going on, and potentially one day lots of business growth, which would be fantastic. And the takeaway from that is that it's really circumstantial. I know lots of people will preach that you shouldn't go to university, but it depends who you are. It depends on the course you're doing. If you want to do one of those courses where it's, does not lead to a career or a job, then I highly advise it from a financial point of view, because that's what I talk about and what I preach. But if you're doing it because you enjoy it, then no one can really tell you that's a bad idea, because if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. So you've really got to weigh up all of the factors like we've discussed today and make that decision for yourself. It's really important that you have good reasoning behind your decision and you can justify it, and that's all that really matters.